Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and in this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about Poland. According to information we have, the NATO countries decided to strengthen their eastern flank. The Polish defense minister said that France and Great Britain are offering to send Rafale and Eurofighter fighters to Poland. At the same time, Zelensky, speaking in Kiev today, said that Russia attacked Poland with drones so that Ukrainian allies would think about their own defense and supply fewer air defense systems to Ukraine itself before the onset of winter. Later, this information was confirmed by the President of France, Macron, announced that France will send 3 Rafale fighters jets to patrol NATO's eastern flank following the drone incident in Poland. Furthermore, according to information we have, Poland is going to deploy up to 40,000 troops on the border with Belarus and Russia. So they deployed these troops due to the beginning of the military exercises by the name of West 2025 that today started on the territory of the Republic of Belarus. Now we see that more and more interesting updates are coming from this country between the European Union and the Russian Federation. I would like to remind you that just yesterday we got reports that the special representative, Trump's special representatives, arrived to Minsk, and he had a meeting with the president of the Republic of Belarus. And we see that a lot of interesting agreements were reached. According to information we have, the United States of America will lift sanctions from the Belarusian company, air flight company. Furthermore, according to information we have, the Republic of Belarus released up to 52 prisoners, and there were the people and civilians of the European Union among them. So we see that despite the situation between the European Union and the Russian Federation and the Republic of Belarus, we see that the relations between the United States of America and these two countries are getting better and better. And today the president of the Republic of Belarus made another very important statement. Russia is ready to fulfill the agreements with the United States on conflict resolution, but European leaders and Zelensky hope to win the war. Russia is ready to fulfill the agreements reached with Americans. We have already discussed this with Vladimir Putin. The question is up to the Europeans and Zelensky. He added that the leaders of the European countries and the president of Ukraine hope to win the war, but this is impossible. Yes, we see that Zelensky and European Union hope that they can win the war with the Russian Federation, and according to information we have, during the previous night, the Ukrainians launched another massive drone attack all over the entire territory of the Russian Federation. This morning, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation stated that during the past night, air defense alert systems intercepted and destroyed 221 Ukrainian drones in different regions of the Russian Federation, in Bryansk region, in the Smolensk region, in the Leningrad region, and so on. According to information we have, the Ukrainians were tasked to damage and to destroy as many as possible oil facilities, oil refineries, and so on. And as a result of those attacks, indeed, the Ukrainians managed to damage some oil refineries and facilities in the southern and in the western and in the northwestern part of the Russian Federation. One of the oil facilities was destroyed in the vicinity of the city by the name of St. Petersburg. So Ukrainians are trying to reduce Russian logistic capabilities by attacking the oil refineries, and since the beginning of this year, most likely the Ukrainians have already launched hundreds of attacks on these facilities, and they managed to achieve probably very good results when talking about military side of this situation. Most likely due to this situation, the Russians will attack Ukraine this upcoming night with hundreds of drones and missiles, dealing additional damage to Ukrainian energy facilities. And this is the reason why Zelensky is asking the European countries to provide him additional air defense systems, because he understands if he continues attacking Russian oil refineries, oil facilities, and many other objects of oil, let's say, infrastructure, this will lead to attacks from the Russian side, mainly to the Ukrainian energy power plants, which will at the end lead to complete collapse of the entire energy system of Ukraine. So that is why Zelensky needs to have air defense system, very powerful air defense system, not just somewhere along the border with Poland, but the system that can cover the entire territory of Ukraine. So this is going to be very interesting and probably very cold winter and cold autumn. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground. During the previous 12 hours, we got additional changes. According to information we have, the Russians finished the battle to the territory to the south of the city of Stepnogorsk. So the Russians, by the beginning of the 12th of September of 2025, managed to establish almost complete control over the fields, fortifications, and trenches between the cities of Kamensk and Stepnogorsk. Now the Ukrainians are trying to consolidate their positions on the territory of Stepnogorsk with the purpose not to allow the Russians to move further in the northern direction, but obviously the Russians will do this in coming days. The Russians have already established complete FPV drone control over the main supply arteria that goes in the direction of Stepnogorsk. In this video we can see how another vehicle was attacked by Russian FPV drone. So this episode took place exactly in this area, and as you can see, this is the main supply arteria, M18 road that goes in the direction of the city of Stepnogorsk from the city of Zaporizhia. Now let's move further. Let's discuss the situation in the eastern Zaporizhia flank, where the Russians also continue their offensive operation. During the previous night, additional changes on the ground were recorded. I would like to remind you that just yesterday the Russians reported that the village of Sosnovka was taken by the Russians, and today we got report that the Russians managed to secure not just the village of Sosnovka but the territory around. So this is the situation by the end of the 11th of September, and this is the situation by the beginning of 12th of September. So as you can see, the Russians secured the village itself completely, especially its northwestern part, and the Russians began advancing in the southern direction towards the next layer of defense that lays between the villages of Ternovo and Verbo. We're talking about this dense network of the fortifications. Furthermore, pro-Russian resources this morning reported that the village of Novonikolaevka also was taken by the Russians, and that currently the clashes are taking place for the village of Kalinovska. The Russians have already begun bombing this territory with aviation, with artillery, and with those flamethrower systems. So most likely there are very heavy clashes already for the territory of this settlement. The Russians, as you can see, are getting closer and closer to the road R85, and if Russians take under control the village of Kalinovsky, then the distance to the road R85 would be less than 80 kilometers, more precisely 17 kilometers and 580 meters, which is very, very close. Probably not enough to establish complete fire control, but obviously the control is going to be much better in comparison with the previous days. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Pokrovsk direction, where the situation remains tense. According to information we have, after the fall of the village of Vodachna, the Russians, I would like to remind you, secured the territory of the settlement several days ago. The Russians began preparation before further offensive operation, this time in the northern direction towards this mine, the mine of Pokrovsk, the strategical position, the strategical defense point of the armored forces of Ukraine. If Ukrainians lose control over this territory, most likely another flower will bloom, and the Russians will be able to advance further in the northern direction, almost till the road of M30 and the settlement of Sergeyevka. As for the previous 12 hours and 24 hours, the Russians began bombing this territory significantly, trying to destroy as many as possible Ukrainian positions and to prepare themselves before the beginning of another rush in the direction of the area. So the Russians were bombing these facilities. Most likely the Russians are preparing themselves before the beginning of this offensive operation. Once again, if this territory falls, the Russians will establish complete FPV drone control over the M30 road, because the distance between these facilities and the road is less than 7 kilometers, just 6 kilometers and 210 meters, which means that nothing will be able to walk through this road without being hit from the Russian forces. As for the northeastern flank, as for the area of Russian breakthrough, the Ukrainians continue their counter-offensive operation, and during the previous 24 hours, during the previous night, additional changes were recorded. For example, this is the situation by the end of the 11th of September, and if you remember, according to pro-Ukrainian mappers and according to neutral mappers, the Ukrainians managed to improve their positions around the village of Volodymyrovka and to expand the gray zone towards the settlement by the name of Novotoretskaya. And today we got additional changes, this time published by pro-Ukraine neutral mappers, and according to them, the Ukrainians began counter-offensive operation from the village of Sofievka towards the settlements of Poltavka and Rusin Yar. So these territories were recaptured by the Ukrainians, so the Russians were forced to fall back according to these mappers. So we see that despite the fact that we haven't received almost anything from these areas since the, let's say, 15th of August of 2025, now we start receiving more and more updates, and according to these updates, according to neutral mappers and pro-Ukraine resources, we see that now the initiative is falling in Ukrainians' hand. We're not saying that the Ukrainians have complete initiative, but it seems that the situation right now is something like 55% to 45% in Ukrainian favor. Anyway, let's wait and see what is going to be next, because obviously the Russians will not allow this to happen. So we're talking about losing of this foothold, strategical foothold to the northeast of the city of Pokrovsk and the entire Pokrovsk agglomeration, because without these positions, Russians will have less chances to establish control over the city of Pokrovsk. And probably this is the reason why the Russians are about to begin offensive operation from the western flank of the city, with the purpose to force the Ukrainians to redeploy additional reinforcements and reserves in this area, which will reduce their pressure in this area. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Siversk direction. During the previous 24 hours, additional changes on the ground were recorded. The Russians were trying to attack the city of Siversk from the northeast using these routes of attack, but Ukrainians stopped Russian offensive with the use of hundreds of drones. So during the previous night, we got this video where we can see how Ukrainians were attacking an FPV droning Russian units that were attacking in this area. Furthermore, we got another very interesting video from the vicinity of the settlement of Yampol. This is very important video because this video shows us how Russians were attacking Ukrainians on the territory of the settlement of Yampol in the northeastern part, so exactly in this area, which means that the Russians most likely have begun battle for the territory of this small farm. So the Russians, if they take under control this territory, will become a bit closer to the settlement of Yampol itself. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.